The record date is May 30th.
2007.
The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15 Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, it's repeated Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. Parents that are out there listening that have problems with the DHS and loss of your children, we try to help parents, so you can give us a call. My number is 276-3956. John's number is 282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa. And it's those issues that we focus our attention in two different ways. Number one, we focus attention on influencing public policy as it relates to child abuse. And secondly, we focus attention on families that are having difficulties with the department, as Don mentioned a moment ago. We like to assist whenever we can in those particular areas. And so we have two ways in which we guide our mission here in Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. And there are indeed some things that are missing in our laws here in Iowa. They're certainly not helpful with respect to the way they deal with the courts and with the families. It seems to me that one of the controversies that's raging right now is whether or not we should let illegal alien families into the United States and make sure that those families are kept together, while at the same time they have no problem of legislating tearing apart families who are not a part of or who are basically a part of the American culture, but for some reason they find it necessary to rip those families apart. Well, there seemed to be a lot of rejoicing going on in this past General Assembly because a new administration, an administration that is democratically taken over the governor's office, taken over the Senate, and taken over the House. And so they were able to do a lot of things that they would not otherwise have been able to accomplish had they been somewhat divided. But this time through, they were able to do a lot of things that we've not been able to do in past years. In fact, I was looking over the enrolled bills, and one of these days we'll try to get a summary of that on the issues that pertain to families, because I think that it's necessary that we focus on those families and look at the some of the details that may affect. I noticed one thing in this past week the Department of Education has formulated some plans as to how to take care of 4-year-olds because we're going to have all kinds of money to teach 4-year-olds. We don't have enough money to teach the other children, but we're going to get in there and teach 4-year-olds. And I noticed that no class can be over 20, and no class can have a pupil-teacher ratio less than 10 to 1. That is, for every 10 children, there has to be at least one adult teaching that class. That's going to mean a lot of money going out to teach 4-year-old children. And somehow we've been able to manage to teach those children without public assistance. But now it seems as though, for some reason, public assistance needs to be in there to get a foothold in the door. Well, there have been a lot of family-type issues that have arisen, and we'll look over those enrolled bills to see just how much they have gotten in there. I think they have one test, for an example, before your child can go to school, where the child has to be tested for lead-based poisoning or lead-based effects of some sort. So that means another huge sum of money going out in a testing program. Every year in April, they celebrate or designate April as being Child Abuse Month. And sometimes they get around to having a convention in April, and sometimes it slips as far away as May. Well, this May, they had their convention. Some 500 social workers and therapists and others dealing with child protection issues met at a motel in West Des Moines and heard a number of speakers. This year, the speaking, the pattern was something to do with parents as teachers. You see, if we can get a hold of, we can teach our children, if we can simply get a hold of the parents and teach them to teach the children the way the state wants the children taught. The teachers our Parents as Teachers program has been a colossal failure throughout the country because of the fact that it sets the agenda. You see, for centuries, we've been able to teach our own children. We read to them at night before they go to bed. We exercise their thought patterns. We help them that's where they learn their first language, is in the home. So how is it that all of a sudden we need parents to be teaching these children? Well, we're going to step in to listen to some of the comments. One of the first comments you'll see, the camera didn't catch the person real well because the camera was right behind her head. And so she's thanking everybody for their marvelous assistance, because for some reason they have been pushing a concept of child protection from child sexual abuse. It should be pointed out that child sexual abuse, percentage-wise, has been going down tremendously. But because it is a hot-button word, they want to push it like crazy. And they want to get into schools so that they can teach children to know about mixed feelings about strangers. Then they came up with the concept, or through study, found out that children are not sexually abused by strangers, even though for years they've been taking money from the state government to teach children about something they call stranger danger. And you may even hear references to Happy Bear, which warns against stranger danger. Well, so it is. They find tricky ways of bilking the Iowa Treasury, that means you and us, for money to teach programs that are not proven programs. They're just simply a waste of time, and in many cases are or counterproductive in their nature. Well, let's step into that conference where we'll hear them talking about their fascination with getting all kinds of new money to expand sexual abuse programs, which statistics show is declining very rapidly here in Iowa. I saw one headline 4 years ago, 2003, in which they said the decline in sexual abuse was 37%. Well, that is a tremendous decline, is it not, in sexual abuse? But they'll keep on beating their drums and collecting the money to do foolish things like this. Well, let's touch a button over here and see if we can't connect with our tape of a convention session. By the way, this session is made up of individuals who are on a council appointed by the governor to hand out these big funds. It happened to be a part of the Prevent Child Abuse Iowa Convention, but that's because they are the statewide contractor that plows into the state treasury for a couple of $1 million a year to run these various programs throughout the counties. Well, here now, that convention. See if we can get that up and running here for us.
Can I say something briefly? Sure. I just wanted to, we wanted to give you a big thanks, those of you who worked with your local legislators to support the expansion for sexual abuse prevention dollars.
Kind of hard to get their face when kind of hard to get their face when you're behind their head.
I'd like to comment too that there are those of us in the room who don't show on the map, but who do sexual abuse prevention programming in their counties with other dollars. And so as we look at that map, I think it's important that we remember too that there are, more things going around than funded by this source only.
Okay, anybody else on this? Well, next I'd like to introduce to you John Hitchcroft, and John is the Senior Policy Advisor for the Governor, and is joining us today to kind of find out what Prevent Child Abuse Iowa is all about.
Hitchcock is from the Governor's office, newly appointed.
I just wanted to take a moment. I appreciate you letting me essentially talk on the agenda. Steve's been very cooperative in providing information as the legislative session has gone on. So I did want to introduce myself. I do Health and Human Services Policy in the Governor's office. And I had this experience about 2 months ago of, we're just about 105 days into this administration. And, there was a state Board of Public Health meeting, and it looked like there were a couple of interesting things on the agenda, so I showed up. And pretty soon there were all these emails flowing around state government. This guy showed up at the state Board of Health meeting, and I realized that there hadn't been a great deal of connective tissue between the governor's office per se and a lot of the the network of providers and organizations even within state government. And sort of that reset my thinking a little bit about the amount of outreach that might be needed to really understand this stuff rather than listening to lobbyist legislators in my own agencies. I can't cover it all, and there's frankly a bewildering number of providers and services being offered, and I'm doing the best I can. But I think, so thank you for your time, because I want to listen and learn about what your agenda is and also be an advocate in this system. That there are things we can do and things we can't. Some involve legislation, some can be done directly through the executive, including your relationship with DHS and all of you, and public health, and all of you have that kind of a relationship. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I wanted to kind of give you the lay of the land on what we did this session and why we're very excited about where things are going within this sort of human services arena. We did a child and family policy center survey when we were running last summer, and I think that got circulated fairly widely among human services professionals. It was fairly well received. And one of the things that was said at that time was that they hadn't had this sort of attention on human services in probably 30 years in this state. And I got a lot of phone calls about, are you guys serious about this, or are you just doing it, to sort of stir us up? And so it's been important this spring for me to say to as many people as I can, we are serious about this. In my former life, I was an attorney in Cedar Rapids practicing family law, and I did indigent defense cases in juvenile court, probably 65 at a time. I read CPC reports and DHS case reports, and I fought on behalf of kids and the parents who were trying to get off whatever it was to start their lives over. You have a governor who cares about the cluster of issues you deal with every day. You have a legislature that is willing to be cooperative within the constraints of a limited budget, and you have staffers who have the background and the experience and the interest to advocate on your behalf. And that's a little different than things have been in the recent past in Iowa, and it's really important that you adjust your thinking to realize you have those advocates within the system now. Having said that, we weren't able to do everything that we wanted to do this year, and I wanted to give you just a little broader than your own legislative agenda, just a feel for the lay of the land. And I think when I'm finished, you'll realize that things are kind of flowing in the right direction. We're not getting everything. It's not like flipping a light switch, but I think over time, over the next few years, we can really change the way we deliver human services in Iowa. So here's some of the things we did. We moved responsibility for the community action agency dollars that come down through TANF from the federal government directly to the Department of Human Rights. It used to be they were administered by the Department of Human Services. There are knowing nods in the room. And we moved it all over to DHR. This will reduce administrative costs, speed the money to the community action agencies, and allow the services that are traditional welfare services in Iowa to be as close to the people as possible through those community action agencies, which have a strong history of getting out into our communities. So be thinking about ways that you can leverage those agencies in your community as well. We were one of 15 states that were going to lose kids from the SCHIP program. We had about 13,000 kids to be kicked off SCHIP as of May 1. And so that technically has come and gone. The good news is we're not going to let it happen. We're going to ask for a supplemental appropriation next year, and legislative leadership has assured us it will happen. We're going to move our Medicaid money around in the short term through a process that I won't belabor, but we're not going to lose those kids off SCHIP, and it's been a lot of work this spring to make sure that didn't happen. Some of the states, including Georgia and Tennessee, really struggled with this and did have to kick people off for a period of time. We're not going to do that. People who are eligible are going to continue to be eligible under both of those programs. I fought hard for a provider rate increase for kid docs, and this was something that got no sort of attention this spring. But Representative Rofaghi and I think that if you do work for kids under Medicaid, you should get a provider rate increase of at least 1%. We didn't do a rate increase at all for anybody this year, and that's part of the reason that this one didn't happen either. But put this on your radar screen. We want to make sure that medical professionals who are engaging with kids are treated differently. And that way we can incentivize the treatment of children, especially in rural Iowa, and help keep that base of general practitioners in those parts of the state. And this will be important to your agencies too. Keep that on your radar screen. It'll come up next year.
I assume that includes dental.
I wanted to include dental. We got the dental screening bill, which is one of the items I wanted to review in just a second. I mean, we required that children who show up for kindergarten have at least one dental screening between ages 3 and 6. This is a fundamental step forward in health for a lot of these kids. And yeah, we need to make sure that dental providers are both available so that kids have a dental home and that they have that screening before age 6. We didn't do it this year.
And that those dentists accept this training.
Well, I think we can. There's a $250,000 grant from the Iowa Dental Association to provide some mobile units that will do treatment and get out into rural areas. So we're working at this from all angles. It's like getting access, getting the funding, and requiring the screening. I mean, we can get there, but it's going to take a little time. So, do you live in an area that has a difficulty with access to dental
Yes.
for kids? Where is that?
Northeast Iowa.
Really? Give me an example. Is there not like a dentist in the county, or?
No.
We have, Carol, we have one dentist that was accepted.
I know about
They
Terrance.
don't have any. They send them either to Waterloo or Cigarette. They don't see.
They just won't take Title 19. Is your point?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I will take that back under advisement and assure you that it's important. Because oral health is one of those things that is one of the pieces that's going to help them learn when they get to school. So thank you, and any of the others of you. I guess this is a good opportunity for me to say, through Steve, you can have the opportunity to have a great deal of influence with us, and I want those ideas to come in and be thinking about how you can better serve your populations in that way. So thank you for that. I have heard it from other parts of the state. I'm a little surprised that Northeast Iowa struggles with that quite as much. So they're driving like an hour to Waterloo to go to the dentist?
If they have a car.
Okay. Right. No.
Transportation.
Okay.
Gas.
No. Thank you so much for that. That's good input. I appreciate it. I want you to know we, as the governor's office, supported the Do More Visitation program. We fought for it. It did go into the Senate budget. It did come out at the end. I can't really. We made our priorities. We put our budget together. I think the legislators in the conference committee, and I can't speak for them, were worried about creating a new entitlement that would rapidly grow in cost and was difficult for us to manage. And there wasn't a lot of good statistical information there to tell us what it would cost, how many people we'd be reaching, and really what that would be. There's also, underneath all this, and I don't want to start any fights, but there was a concern, there was an interdisciplinary concern about who would go into this home. Is it a nurse? Is it an ARNP? Does it have to be under the supervision of a doctor? Could it be a social worker? So, something to keep in mind. I think a proposal that sort of delineates all that and describes what requirements would be part of that visitation helps us both understand how it would be organized and what it would cost. And I hope you'll come back with that one next year. It's a good proposal. We did do child care registration. We started the process through our community mental health centers and talking about a real child mental health system in the state. So here's what we did. The community mental health centers told us they needed $23 million. We were able to do 12. And we put $1 million into a risk pool that would have helped them borrow when they were cash strapped. The risk pool part got eliminated. Hopefully it'll come back next year. But the other piece of that bill was we set up a commission in the interim to study our community mental health needs and how those services are distributed. And there are counties in central and western Iowa who don't have access to community mental health at all. And if you're a kid, it's even worse. There's PMIC and there's virtually nothing else, and I'm not telling any of you anything. But my point is, what I hope is that this is the start of about a 3-year discussion where we overhaul the way mental health services are delivered in our state, and that kids are part of that discussion. So start that now too. As you hear and talk and have opportunities professionally to interact with people who do mental health, say, hey, I think the legislators and the governor are engaged in a discussion about how those services would be done. For what it's worth, the institutional providers like Orchard Place here in Des Moines are as frustrated as you guys are at the ability to access services when there are real mental health needs among children. And that's a personal goal of our administration to try and fix. And we'll take your suggestions about how to do that, and maybe making that a part of your legislative agenda next year would be good as well. So I have taken up more time than I needed to or intended to, and I appreciate your invitation or allowance of me to come to the table today.
If I could just have one comment. Across the state, access to institutional care, whether it be residential or PMIC, for the mentally retarded who are under an IQ of 75, and very specifically females, it's impossible to find at this time. And it's a population that desperately needs, when you have a child who has fetal alcohol effects, an attachment disorder, and a bipolar, and a list of, borderline and obsessive and all these other things, and there's no place that child can go and be safe and stabilized. And what I'm hearing from both, everything I read from the governor's office, from Iowa Children's Mental Health, every place is, there is no place. You can't voluntarily China them. You can't get them services at all because there is no place that will take them. And it appears that it's not just cap on the number of beds. It's these organizations have disappeared due to the change in funding. And I was told that you can no longer voluntarily China someone due to mental health issues or good cause. When you have a child who is so out of control that they are in danger of hurting themselves and others, and there's no place to put them and no system to work through that, it's very concerning to me, because having been a foster parent for 10 years, having worked with these children and been advocates, I have 10 special needs children that I have adopted and been advocates for all of them and spoken nationally on fetal alcohol effects, and I can't get help for my own child. And I'm told I can't even go out of state because there's caps for the out of state as well.
But you're not wrong, though, and I appreciate you sharing that issue or concern. And we hear this all over the state. It is a systemic issue. There isn't a child mental health system in Iowa. We have overburdened clinics with 5-month waiting lists, and it's unacceptable. And that's the best I can offer you at this point. I will tell you, we had a bill this spring, which we supported, that would have required private insurance providers to cover orthopedic care. And that failed, and it failed pretty strongly. So the insurance industry is engaged in this discussion, and they're not helping. I don't know that private providers are the whole answer. I think part of it is additional Medicaid funding and working with our providers to make the dollars go further. In terms of the availability of services for community, I'm pretty worried about that. We don't even have a solution for that right at the moment.
Well, McIntyre House at 4 Oaks in Cedar Rapids was the only one I knew of that would take those IQs. They had one of my daughters twice. And then I was told when I went for the second daughter, they said that Iowa Foundation had changed the rules and you had to have an IQ of 80. What I'd like to know is why that kind of change came about.
Those are cost-cutting measures. I mean, flat out, there isn't enough money in Medicaid, and so they adjust to fit the number of residents they think they can handle. And we're going to need more providers. I mean, thank God for the 4 Oaks of the world.
Yeah.
Everybody from 4 Oaks here, but I had a couple of kids in the stock program over there, which is very good with sexual abuse. But we need those on a regional basis. We need more of them. We don't have them, and I'm frankly not certain how we incent the creation of them. But I'll take any suggestions anybody has. So.
And are you going to give out your email address?
I will. I realized on the way here that I didn't have business cards, and I couldn't decide whether it was a good or bad thing today. I'll spell my name for you. It's John Joey Jen, and then dot, and then Hedgecock is spelled Hedgecoth, and it's at, and then Gmail. So it's Google Mail, gmail.com. So let it rip. I just got done with the substance abuse folks last week for what we did to them. So
Just quickly,
Yeah.
we went over the entire look at mental health in the state, and child mental health is just one component of that. So you're saying that there's going to be a 3-year look at the entire state look at mental health services?
correct, and it's my hope. Well, we're not looking at the institutional stuff as much as we are community mental health. I don't know that much is going to change in the Woodwards and Glenwoods of the world.
No, but the community.
In the community side, yes. And what I'm giving you is a personal commitment that the child mental health part will be part of that discussion.
Right.
I think what you need to be thinking about is how your advocacy can begin now with a specific agenda about what you'd like a community child mental health system to look like. We all know that we need it and we don't have it. And how do we get providers into the rural areas? How do we get a child site to locate in Mason City or whatever, right? So, are there, am I looking at salary incentives? We need to do things around our College of Nursing, our School of Social Work at the U of I to get people in and get them out into rural areas for a couple of years. I mean, so I'm trying to spur discussion.
It's a goal picture. It's really a big picture. We have at Blackhawk County, one of our empowerment sub-task teams is the youth mental health task team. And the very things we're talking about are the issues that we've been dealing with for, well, at least about 3 years now. And we keep hoping with Blackhawk County Mental Health Center, Tom Eakins, I don't know if you know Tom.
I do know Tom.
And,
I do know, but
go ahead.
No, just that he's as fearful about trying to stay open as
Right.
some of the other providers are. And he was one of the ones who came to the Capitol this spring. So, we need to be thinking about, if we had resources, what would we be doing with them, and then building a coalition around that. I guess my main message today is you have more receptivity than you've had in decades. Now what?
Good to hear.
And thank you.
Thank you, John. Now, we'd like to introduce Peggy North-Jones. Peggy, if you just want to share a little bit more about yourself with us.
I'll give being depressed first. No, I have the fortune to travel around the country, and I hear it all over. I hear the rural issues in New Mexico, the same as that. When I came to do this, I have been on staff with Terrance's teachers for the last 5 years. I've been in the mental health field for about 35 years. I have a child psych background, and I'm finishing my doctorate in family and marital therapy, and I consult, and my big priority over the last few years has been supervision and professional development of people working in this field, but my passion has always been children and families. And I guess parents as teachers, I can share a little bit with you because I think a lot of the issues, you have a new state leader here in Iowa for parents as teachers, which hopefully will create a network and do some bringing together of the resources. All of the people in the home visiting field are very, very aware of the importance of getting this message out from birth to 5. And I may be preaching to the choir here, but a lot of the things you're talking about that are so heavy and are such big issues, we come from the other end, which is let's start early. Let's start at birth. Let's start prenatally. There are states that are doing programs. South Carolina does a program in the hospital. The governor gives some kind of key to education to all parents, and the start of that is parent education and home visiting. So there are places, and there are numerous examples of that, where people have said, we have to let parents know what this whole idea of a home visit and parent education is about. And it relates to infant mental health, and it certainly relates to collaboration. It relates to relationship building. Outcome studies that parents as teachers have been able to do show two things across the board: that people who are involved in parents as teachers up through 4th grade, as far as the studies have gone, have higher levels of parental involvement and higher levels of kindergarten readiness for their children. And there's a white paper that's just coming out of some Yale studies and Harvard that's looking at other things. We have in our logic model the child abuse and prevention concept, and we're really looking to document the impact of early intervention on that. It's hard to do because by nature of our home visiting, we don't control anything. It's broad-based intervention. It's anybody can have these services, so we don't control, is it a firstborn child, is it a teen mom? We just have rampant numbers of people served. I think 270,000 children, I think, were served across the country last year in our model, and across the home visiting forum, when you add HIPPY and healthy families and the other parent, infant, child, there's all kinds of models providing services. We do know that when you get in early, it works. We have issues, though, and I think all of the home visiting forum and all of the home visiting programs are looking at things. We have, in the last couple of years, I'll just give you some examples, had an active thing with the Bureau of Indian Affairs where we found that if we could get into the reservations that had an Even Start program, add a home visiting component, we got wonderful success. The funding got sliced, so half of those programs went away. Senator Bond has been very helpful in providing funding for a military program right now called Heroes at Home. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but it's a wonderful thing where we've put parents as teachers on 7 military installations, I think 5 Army, 1 Navy, and 1 Air Force, because the majority of our military people are under the age of 25 and have 2 children. And then you send 1 or 2 parents overseas. What better situation could there be for child abuse, for early attachment issues, for all kinds of stress levels? So through this grant, that's a pilot program right now for $1 million, hopefully be renewed next year, we get parent education and home visiting on bases, which is just being able to get into those kind of populations. There's also, sponsored by Bond and I think Dodd and Kennedy, there's a program pending called Education Begins at Home Act, which would put $500 million into home visitation. Every state would get an allotment. Part of that has to be targeted for English language learning. The other part, I think, high-risk families. But it would bring money to every state to create. Now, it's gone through several channels, but as John was speaking, it gets hung up and stuck, and I don't know, it's supposed to be reintroduced this year, but they've asked everybody to please back that and call and support Education Begins at Home. And what we're basically saying is, it's so obvious to all of us, if you start early, if you talk to the highly stressed young parent and talk about what it is to be a parent, what your child needs, talk about brain development, and the nice thing about most of these intervention programs is they have a curriculum. You're not just going in and visiting. And so part of our battle is getting people to understand this is these people are trained, they have a prescriptive curriculum. You go in it each month and it tells you what to cover, what to show in terms of neurological development, what to show in terms of social emotional growth, and basically what you need to be doing as a parent. And it also then supports the parent by giving them an advocate, giving them a friend, giving them someone to talk to, because we all know one of the biggest issues in the world is our parents are isolated. Many of them are out there with they don't have Aunt Bessie come over and say, I had the same problem when my child was 4 months, here's what you can try. And that's what a parent educator does. Now, to take a step back from those of us who don't know, you say parent education. If I talk to people and say I do parents as teachers, everybody thinks it's a homeschooling program. There's a huge amount of controversy, if you want to talk in terms of political, about people who do home visiting want to come in and run the lives of people and tell them how to raise their children. And it can be very touchy territory in a lot of areas. Kansas has a big coalition against home visiting and parent education, because you're not supposed to tell other people how to raise their children. And what we talk about is empowering parents, making them aware of community resources, and giving them handouts that specifically speak about their child. We have dental handouts that say, are you aware that even infants need to have dental things? The other thing that I think has been a big movement in the home visiting is that we've realized we have to make adaptive curriculum. And before I left, I was starting to work on that. Our curricula and our services don't work well in cities. We look around the country, we just don't have a big inn in Washington or New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, because we have a set curricula that responds to a certain value system or a certain way of presenting information that doesn't match these people. So we've begun to look at, by qualitative studies and some interviewing, what do you need that's different? Same for rural. Very rural people seem to need more contacts to set up rapport. You don't come, one time, I just did a workshop in Kansas, in Missouri, upstate, and the people said, look, we got to go 5 times before the person who's in charge of the community says you're a good person. And once they know you're an okay person, then when your car comes, they go, she's okay, take her papers, do what she says. But it's different from the one-time visit, which, we went in thinking, okay, we'll do one home visit, we'll create some kind of relationship, and then we'll be invited back. Doesn't work that way. It does in a lot of our places, and we're successful. But we're now starting to look at where are we not successful. And we have to understand that we have to do things in a lot of different ways, and we need more training. The other exciting thing we did, I think, in terms of some of the things you were talking about, we have a new curriculum at Parents as Teachers Design. I'm not sure if the other programs do, and it's for supporting care providers. So there's a whole curriculum that can be done for child care providers. They then go through the same information about brain development and what to expect developmentally and what they need to be doing, and they are given a handout that they then share with the parents when they come to pick up their child. And they say, I had a visit from the parent educator today, here's what she's talking about, and she gave me this to send home. It's because we know, what a huge proportion of our children are in child care. And if we can't reach those parents, then we can reach the child care providers. So, with those kind of things, with the military, we're just trying to look at how we're going to reach people. We all know infant mental health now is you're hearing that word all over. A lot of what home visitors have done for a long time is infant mental health. They're not social workers, they're not trained to do the really intense, but they're trained to do early information around bonding. How do you raise healthy children? How do you engage? How do you prevent these serious things later? By just doing delivery of educational information. And so the whole infant mental health, and I think just in terms of what we're beginning to understand, we're beginning to train people that violence matters to babies and toddlers. That's been a big new thing. People used to say, well, they're 2. They saw that shooting. It didn't have any impact. And now we're beginning to get the word out that for these people in highly violent areas or people who are witnessing methamphetamine labs blowing up and the Kansas disasters, we've got to get people in to do prevention in those areas. Because again, we can keep abuse and high stress situations down if we can get people information. If we can say your child not sleeping for the next 2 weeks is the most normal thing in the world after what they've been through, then the parents aren't freaking out and screaming and yelling. And that's, to me, the value of home visitation. That's what happens when we intervene early. We give parents the information and the tools that they need. Incredibly hard work, and I guess the only other things I want to say is my frustration and what I was doing at the professional development level is when funding gets tight, when people have to pull dollars, they seem to pull it from the areas of professional development and supervision. And I've actually had legislators say to me, these are just people going in and talking to parents and playing with kids. Why do they need supervision? And I say, come on a home visit with me. You watch what's going on as this person does this and tell me they don't need a supervisor on a regular basis. Tell me they don't need the opportunity to go to conferences like this and time away from the office. So I yell all the time to people, you have got to advocate and build into grants professional development dollars. You've got to require that. We do it for physicians, we do it for social workers and psychologists. If you don't give your people money for ongoing professional development supervision, just to be able to support that, that's, to me, absolutely a necessary part of the monies we're giving to programs. And if we don't give that money, then we're going to get burnout, it's what, $2,000, $3,000 to replace every employee in the first year that we lose. And we lose a pretty good number of home visitors. Why? Because they're not paid $7 million a game. It just doesn't happen. So we lose people. So I think in terms of if you're writing grants, if you're looking for funding, put an equal amount of money into how are you going to sustain quality service delivery by giving people quality support so they can be the best they can be. Then you're going to get the best you can get in your community from people. This is tough work. I've done several sessions today around, this is very, very hard work we ask these people to do for very little pay, as you all know, long hours, and we've got to give them some benefits and some rewards and support at the state level, which I think is incredibly important. So I'm ecstatic that you're really listening.
We'll be back in a couple minutes with another tape. In the meantime, I'm going to read a little bit from an email that was written by Greg Hansen. Beware of child protective services, whether it's legal or not, whether it's improper or not, whether it's bad or not. Your state's CPS agency will act on attitude, tell lies to their judge, remove the children, presume everything good to be evil, and generally grind you up in their witch hunt. They won't even rely on any written standards, no rules, just the attitude of the accuser. Get a lawyer now, before CPS workers show up at your doors trying to con their way into your home to look for dirt you never imagined they could use against you. Don't let them in with a warrant, or don't let them in without a warrant, and make sure it is signed by a real judge. Because there are times when there'll be court documents that have a signature, or may not even have a signature, but it may not be legal at all. Don't trust your own lawyer. Now up above he says, go get a lawyer. Now he says, don't trust your own lawyer. I agree to that. It's your case. You should be the one concerned about it. Public pretender or paid, there is a huge problem with their country club relationship with judges and attorneys for the other side. Many will give you a 10-minute rush to stipulate right outside the courtroom and without any real consultation about the pros and cons of stipulation. Never stipulate. Don't let them stipulate for you in any sense. Make that very clear. Stipulation is a guilty plea, and CPS often promise the carrot on the stick, which is a swift return of your child. They hold the carrot out in front of you like a donkey, which is your children, and parents will basically do anything they can to supposedly get their children back, and then afterwards they find out they've been deceived by the very system that held that carrot out and took their children in the first place. And why do they do that? For the money. Money, money, money. It goes on. Go to cpswatch.com and read up on the tricks of the trade. That's cpswatch.com. There's a lot of good information in there about
Not
DHS.
anymore.
Not anymore?
It's shut
Yes.
down.
Okay, it might be. It has been shut down and come back up, and maybe it is shut down now. People who are not fit to wash your socks will sit in judgment of you and tell you what to do, even in areas that are not theirs to say. If you look up their records, you will often find some interesting dirt. I did. They like to play God. They think they are saving children. God save us from people with good intentions. God save us from godless people who believe in their cause of saving people or saving children, even if it kills the children. They do not follow the credo, do no harm. Know that you're not alone. Prepare for the real big bad wolf to appear at your door.
Okay.
John?
Okay, we'll return to the tape and to the conference, to the speaker.
But if you're talking about transportation and paperwork and the ability to talk about that visit in round numbers, and that's one of the things we had to do was actually come up with some formula numbers, because people said, tell me why this costs so much. How can it possibly? If you're doing a 45-minute visit, why do you need that much time? So that's one way we've done it. And the other way is just basically what we see in terms of cost, if you're talking economics, cost to programs when they lose people. And when you're losing 2 to 3 to 4 employees a year, and you've got to retrain that person, take them through the whole thing, and get them up and started, you lose a whole lot that way too. So, supervision in terms of some of the programs, the most they can do is an hour a month, but they meet with every individual an hour a month. Cost-wise, that's a whole lot cheaper than the cost of having to go through retraining of one person. Does that answer?
I have a question about how you provide services. You talked about having to go in 5 times before you felt like you were having any, reception at all. And so when you design a program, how do you talk about the length of time that you're in a home or the number of visits that it takes to really be effective in having an impact?
The thing about parents as teachers, that's the one I can speak to. I know Healthy Families and Hippie and some of the others are different. Ours are, everybody's different. Every state has a different provision of services. So it's who funds it and what they want, but we'll say, and when I say go in 5 times, that was just something that came out of this meeting in the inner city and in the rural areas, why we asked them why things weren't being successful. They said, because you don't give us, if you pay for 1 visit, but it takes me 5, and so I go in and do my 1 and I'm never invited back again, that's considered basically a lost visit, and that person's not seen quite as successful. And they were saying we really need more paid in the front so that we can build rapport with these people. But we talk, some programs are once a month. Sometimes people go in once a week for high need. It just depends how the program prescribes that. It's a tremendous variety.
So it really is funding driven.
In St. Louis, in Missouri, I don't know if you're familiar, but in Missouri, Parents as Teachers is part of every school district. Every school district must provide services birth to 3 for everyone in the population in that county. And that's because Parents as Teachers started through the Kit Bond and the governor's office started at that time, and that's the way it was set up. So we have 535 programs in Missouri. Kansas is funded the same way. Every school district has to provide Parents as Teachers services. Now you go to Texas, it's through the Department of Mental Health. You go to Virginia, it's whoever can possibly throw dollars that way. Here, it sounds like you all have collaborative or braided services with a number of different agencies. So they'll decide how it's presented. In Missouri, they're paid 5 visits a year. That's the way it's set up. High needs families can get up to 15. And what they were saying is if I only have 5 visits a year and it takes me 5 to set rapport, I'm lost. Yeah. And so those programs look terrible. Like in the city of Kansas City, they get 11%. Other programs we have serving 98% of their population. Well, what they were saying is we look so bad because we can't work the same way. And then you got the whole issue of you get a school district going bankrupt and being taken over by the government because they don't provide services, and then you come in and say, hi, I'm the home visitor from that school district, and parents are going, why would I want to let you in my home? So there's issues there too in terms of who you're funded by and what the reputation is. It's very, I tell people who do home visiting service, this is tough work. You know how easy it is to be a social worker sitting in your office and saying, come see me when you have a question? Versus, hi, I'm coming into your house, there may be a meth lab in the garage, or you may not be home for the first 5 times I come, but I'm going to keep coming. I'm your home visitor. It's just an incredibly complex word, but so powerful for what it does. Families who get it and who love it will tell you, those of you who do this work, there's nothing like it for their home visitor. They just really depend on those people to get them through the early years.
So, explain again, you said something about 5 visits in Missouri. Is that all that a family can have in a year? Unless they're high need?
Unless they're high need, that's the way it's set up. Now, there are some exceptions. People get additional funding. Some individual school districts will look for other funding, or if the school district wants to throw in some more money, but that's what they get from the Department of Secondary and Elementary Education, funding for 5 visits.
So is there an expectation that you change or enhance behaviors in 15 sessions?
Yes.
And your outcomes on that are?
Higher levels of kindergarten readiness and higher levels of parent involvement. Parents who get those 5 visits every year.
You're viewing a presentation before the PCA, that's Prevent Child Abuse Iowa, and the Governor's Advisory Council on Child Abuse Protection Programs.
It doesn't, but it's 5 visits.
This is a special speaker that was flown in early May for the convention.
Is there a touch base? And And if you're a parent who's totally lost and clueless and no idea what to do with this baby, somebody coming 5 times a year who's not somebody yelling at you or telling what you're doing wrong. And that's, the parents as teachers model, or all the home visiting models, are very strengths-based. They're all about what you're doing right and how we can help you get resources to do it even better. And so I think that in itself is very refreshing for people, that someone comes and says, you're a good mom, you're a good dad, here are some things you can do even better. But you're right, I mean, for those of us who do work with intense families, it's tough. The other thing that you made me think of too, that somebody mentioned, one of the other things we're really starting to look at, and Parents as Teachers is working on, is the Fatherhood Initiative, which somebody raised that question, and that is, we realize much of the curriculum, much of the group meetings are focused on service delivery to moms, and that we had to talk differently, and there are some programs doing, there's a program that does fishing for fathers. I think they had 350 people at their last thing. Unbelievably successful. Roughhousing kind of activities in the gym on a Saturday morning, dads and donuts. They found that if they just began to look at what they were doing, and addressed it to fathering issues, they got wonderful success. And there is nothing more exciting than seeing these roomfuls of dads with little babies and trying to figure out how to be the best dad they can be as well.
Peggy, you've mentioned 2 or 3 times about collaboration, and maybe you could just share with us in your visits, what's an example of a really truly collaborative process in Parents as Teachers that you found in your travels?
In terms of different home visiting?
Collaborative efforts. You talked about collaboration and working together. It's a...
Where you have the Parents as Teachers working with the pediatricians in town, working with the hospital, maybe the Chamber of Commerce is involved in distributing information. So that, because the same issue I think someone raised earlier, how do you get this information out? How do you let people know it's an okay thing to be involved in and that you want to be involved? And so they found pediatricians said Parents as Teachers or HIPPY or whatever is a good program to be involved. That helped. That hospitals had that as part of their information. There are carnivals or whatever where they would have booths, and so it just Parents as Teachers with faith-based group, and that they would present to them as well. So basically communities that buy into early intervention. I can't remember where most recently was. They do a parent university on Saturday. They open up the high school. They open it up to all parents in the community, birth to 5, and they have the firemen are there, the policemen are there, the school superintendent did the opening talk. They had workshops for parents. They had, lunch. They had a petting zoo. The helicopter was there so that the kids could get, and it basically just brought families together and said, working as a community to support our youngest kids and to get everybody off to a comfortable start is really important.
But we have a lot of initiatives of collaboration in our state, and we see a lot of evidence of things working and the things we're talking about. I just wondered if there was a template out there with some state that said we've got the answer. And we talked about North Carolina and so forth. But,
I don't know if there's an answer. I think people are just what I find is that people feel disconnected from their communities so much, or their counties, and that the more we can bring people in to feel like we have something so you don't have to hide. You're not off in hiding off in some areas, but that people basically begin to feel as young parents they can come and resources are there for them, and there's not a problem asking. And I think when that happens, you start to get all kinds of, you get competition between different home visiting places for different dollars. There's such a small pool of dollars that, so what I think in the collaboration I was mentioning the home visiting forum, and the home visiting forum was federal dollars that brought together everybody, the 6 or 7 people doing national home visiting programs, and said, let's get together and share what we're doing research-wise, what our outcomes are. I worked on the supervision one, so we can see if we're all doing the same thing, and if we're in the same communities, how we can work together. Head Start, Even Start. Because lots of times people aren't even talking to each other. My feeling is everybody in Head Start should have the opportunity to have a home visitor if they want that. Everybody in child care should be able to get early information if they need that. But that takes the community opening up resources. I don't know, did that answer your question?
yes, it does.
I wanted to share something in this state, in Cedar Rapids. We are in a pilot project with St. Luke's. So they get a new baby to a mom who might be high risk. They call us. We do Parents as Teachers. Then as child gets older, as we identify risk factors, then we refer to early access. So that's been a nice community collaboration for us. And now Mercy has become involved. So it can happen, but the funding and everyone, it does make it a little touchy sometimes because that would be my dollar, not yours, that kind of thing. So it is really scary, but that has been a really nice
That's been one of the
project.
outcomes they found too, is that since most of the home visiting programs, parents and teachers specifically does screening, that the identification of early problems, I don't have the number in my head, but there was some huge number last year that were identified across the country that would not have been identified to kindergarten entry, but instead were identified birth to 3.
Well, if you can share that story, the results, the outcomes that you have, with increased parental involvement, and with increased school readiness or better school readiness, what else is it? Because all the research shows that if we can have greater parental involvement, and if kids are ready for school, then we have much better chance of success. So,
And all the other things that we worry about, juvenile delinquency, child abuse and neglect, the incredible problems are all tied into that. To say nothing of the fact that now you have all the people from economics talking about, you invest in early childhood, you're saving huge amounts of dollars for your community. So that's been a real nice secondary thing that's come out of the Department of Treasury, and the guy from Minneapolis, I forget his name, you even know his name, was touring around the country talking about the buy-in for birth to 3. You buy in early childhood, you save millions of dollars.
well, we've had evidence of that here in Iowa with business leadership really taking a strong advocacy position, really for the right reasons, and
Which is great.
looking not only now, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, another generation, what's going to happen economically and to the quality of life as well as economically. So those things are happening. We've got some real champions here. Barry Griswold is one, Principal Financial, one of the Fortune 500 companies. And he's got a personal interest, and he's gotten his colleagues together, and well, I'm going on a soapbox.
Well, no, the Iowa Business Council
Yes,
worked
the
through to
Iowa
find the
Business
3 things they could do to meet Iowa's workforce shortage of 150,000 workers over the next 10 years, and they came up with
Yes.
early childhood development program 0
It's
to
all
3,
connected.
which is wild because you think it's way over here, but it's not at
Such
all.
good sense.
It's not
And
at all.
so then, are they working to influence the
You bet they
legislature?
are.
Well, there's no question they are. In fact, the universal preschool bill we just did
Yeah, it's-
largely came out of that effort that they started. And that's just a start. Getting to 4-year-olds is a start. We'll go to 3-year-olds. It's got to become universal. We have to agree upon what kind of programs are offered. But I'm just buttressing what Floyd said, that it's a valuable effort, and it has so many ripples, including economic ones.
And then just to dovetail on that, the wonderful study that came out of Yale this year said that if you're going to be successful in preschool, who gets kicked out of preschools? Kids are getting kicked out of preschools. All you have to do is add a mental health consultant to your preschool, and you drop that by more than 50%.
That's a good idea.
Give somebody to listen to, give someone to tell their story, and all of a sudden, you've got mental health consultants, and mental health consultants can be parent educated, they can be all kinds of people who can talk about normative child behavior. But otherwise, we've got kids in preschool who are flunky,
my
being
child got
kicked
expelled.
out. That's right, they're expelled. 3-year-old expelled out of school because people don't know how to handle them. We don't want to drug the world. So that feeds into the whole thing too, about you need to build that whole community base of putting consultants, people who know about early childhood, into these programs once we start them. And then add a home visiting component, you got it made. All you need is money.
Good to meet someone who has it figured out.
Only on a good day.
With that.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for having me. Very pleased to be here.
Now we move on to ICAP grant-related questions or comments. Anybody have any questions about the grant process?
This is the chairman of the
Any
committee.
issues or comments from the council representatives?
I could go on for an hour.
Well, yeah.
Just one more thing, Floyd.
No, I just think so many people here are talking about your empowerment, and wear your empowerment hats, you wear your DCAT hats, you wear your prevent child abuse hats and so forth. And those things are, those kinds of things you do are just so vitally important.
Well, we want to thank you for tuning into the CPI report. They are going on for a few more minutes, but our time has some constraints. So we will say good day for now, and we'll see you next week.